Welcome to the Real Paranormal Stories podcast with your host, Christopher Buckner. Send your stories to realparanormalstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Royalty-free music provided by Kevin MacLeod and Tabletop Audio. And now, let's take a trip into the paranormal. This story comes from Reddit user Stupid Fwog. The ending of that word is FWOG. And this is their story. This happened a few years ago, 2019 I think. I, at the time, was living in an apartment with my mom and brother in Minnesota, and I was just about to move back home. We had only moved to Minnesota for 2 years, and this was the last year. We lived on the second floor in this apartment building in a very small town in Minnesota. My bedroom window faced the cornfield across the street, and our street had literally no streetlights on it. The closest thing to a streetlight was the apartment sign that had those lights on it that highlight the sign at night. There was a neighborhood right next to our apartment building, and that was the only neighborhood for a little bit. Like I said, small town in Minnesota. One night, like the same week that I moved back to my home state, I was sitting at my piano in front of my bedroom window when I saw something poking its head out of the corn across the street. Like I said, there were no street lights, but the apartment highlighting lights were those bright white kind, so I was able to see it was a black goat just sticking his head out of the corn. It was odd, but the cornfield belonged to a farm, so I just figured one of the goats had escaped. I go back to my piano, doing whatever, when I get curious and look up and see the goat is now in the middle of the street, just facing my apartment building. It was probably around midnight when I saw this, and naturally got creeped out because earlier I had just finished watching some horror movie with my mom. So I get up and move to my bed just to be away from my window. About an hour goes by and my curiosity gets the better of me, and I go peek out my window and see the goat in the grass of my apartment complex. Because the goat was so much closer and in a better light from the apartment sign, I could see that instead of front hooves, this goat had hands. Like human hands. Or human-ish hands. Coming right out of the goat's legs. He had gnarled-looking gray hands with long, skinny fingers that looked mangled and broken. Because I had just watched horror movies and have an overactive imagination, I tried to convince myself he wasn't there and just left my room. I was sleeping on the couch that night. Y'all, the next fucking morning I walk into my room and see this greasy handprint with long broken fingers on the outside of my window with little black hair stuck to the grease on the second floor. I never saw the goat again before I moved, but earlier this year, I had moved in with my boyfriend, and every now and then since I moved in with him, I've had weird dreams, like vivid dreams, with the goat just hanging out in the background. Car crash dream? He's there on the side of the road. Camping dream? He's there stalking in the background. And it's only the weird, spooky, vivid, nightmarish dreams that he pops up in. The most vivid and spookiest of dreams happened last month. For whatever reason, I was in Salem, or a Salem-esque town, dressed in Puritan clothing and everything. It was foggy, night, and I could literally smell the rain and the mold on the old wood buildings. I was in a field walking away from the woods towards the town, and the goat was there just watching me walk away from him in the woods. My boyfriend literally had to wake me up because I was twitching so bad in my sleep. and I woke up cold like I had literally been standing in a foggy field in Old Salem at night. I saw him once in real life, and now he's stalking my dreams. That's my little ghost story. This story comes from Jess, who was living in Manchester, New Hampshire at the time. This is Jess's story. Last night, while I was starting to drift off to sleep, I was woken up by the sound of heavy breathing. I was on my side facing away from my boyfriend, who was sleeping in the same bed. At the same time, I felt incredibly uneasy, and like someone was in the room with us. I rolled over and clearly saw a figure standing over my boyfriend, looking down at him and breathing heavily. The breathing almost sounded like snarling. It was so intense. I immediately started yelling at it to go away and leave him alone. I don't remember exactly what I said because I was just barely awake and frankly terrified. I threw my body over his and reached behind me to turn on the light. I looked away for a split second to find the light switch, and when I looked back, the figure was gone. My boyfriend woke up and was trying to comfort me. I was in hysterics, bawling my eyes out, and I never cry. He asked me what happened, and while I was explaining to him what happened and what I saw, the light turned off by itself. It's never done that before. I asked my boyfriend to turn on the flashlight on his phone to give us some light in the room, and when he reached over to do that, the light turned back on by itself. A little bit of history. I have lived in this apartment for 11 years without any issues. However, my boyfriend has experienced many things throughout his life that are definitely disturbing. He has experienced waking up and feeling like he was being pressed into the bed. And when he said, "Get off me," whatever it was moved down the bed making audible scratching noises, which his wife at the time heard. Another important piece of history to know is that my boyfriend is a widower. His wife died suddenly of a blood clot without any warning almost 2 years ago. About a month before she died, his best friend dropped dead at his birthday party from heart failure. Even scarier is the fact that the week before his wife died, she said she saw a figure in the bedroom while they were sleeping. She never got a chance to fully explain to him what she saw because she died before she could. In this apartment since he moved in, things have gone missing and randomly reappeared in the middle of the room months later. We have had cabinets loudly bang, the heat has been turned up and down by itself, and our cats randomly stare at nothing. That's the end of Jess's story. That's all for this episode of the Real Paranormal Stories podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a review anywhere this podcast can be found.